Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I was planning on not giving an episode today, actually, but a member requested an episode, so I thought I'd attempt an episode, and let me see. Pretty much, guys, I'm going to try to the best of my ability to give this lecture. At the same time, if there's coughing noises, if my voice is a bit shaky, please excuse that, and let's dive into it. A title arose to me, a title that fascinated me, a title that gave me a little bit of goosebumps, you know. I was thinking about the scientific mind, and in this episode, usually I talk about metaphysics, but I want to focus on physics, and I want to share how my eyes have opened to the concepts of the physical universe, and in some sense, what is the value of the scientific method, because it has a value, and the New Age community, I find, doesn't understand the scientific method because we only focus on the consequence. So, the title arose, are scientists using imagination to figure reality? The reason I would say another reason, a cultural reason why I'm sharing this is because on YouTube, I have seen a lot of debates between theists and atheists. I have, in some sense, noticed that all human beings on this planet can be divided into two categories. Regardless of if the person, uses the archetype of a philosopher, a scientist, a religious person, a spiritual person, but usually I can see everybody on the planet, and I can, through a cause and effect model, pretty much see that some people's philosophies start immaterial. That means the causal position is the cause to their thinking is not material, or I would say it this way, it's as if some people feel the unknown came first, the invisible came first, then the visible. Some people consider the visible came first, then the invisible. This is in regards to how people formulate identity and formulate a meaning in this life. You can say eyes open, and when the eyes open, the game of life begins, and the game of imposing meaning into objects begins. So, in this episode, it's going to be more like I need people to look at the video of the look at the wallpaper of the video. I'm going to share some diagrams. I want to right now show people what the scientific method is, what its aim is. And people think science is a philosophy or an ideology. Believe it or not, it's just a method of approach to a landscape that is way beyond our eyes. This world is so big, ladies and gentlemen, that it cannot possibly, that the scientific method starts with an observation, because all of us, literally, that's life. You're born and you're in a world, and observance begins. So now you can, in some sense, you research and you come up with a hypothesis. That means, imagine, pretty much think of it this way. Isaac Newton was sitting under a tree, and an apple falls into his mind. It falls on his head maybe, but it falls into his mind, or he just notices an apple falling. So in some sense, he makes an observation. He tests it out in some sense. Sorry, he doesn't test it. He in some sense makes an observation. There is no research because it's an exploration. He makes a hypothesis. The word hypothesis, guys, it comes from if I remember correctly, it comes from hypothesis. and hupo means under in Latin, and thesis means placing. And so the word hypothesis means the foundation of, let's say, a structure of meaning. If we want to see meaning into the world, it has a starting point. So you can say the hypothesis is the imposition of meaning after observation. We're pretty much throwing a scenario out there, to see if it's real or not. Then we test and experiment, and in some sense we attain a sort of empirical understanding. So we test the hypothesis. Pretty much you can imagine Isaac Newton kind of seeing the apple fall, and then him being like, yo, what if there's a force behind this? Then he throws it again, and it throws the apple, and he notices that everything is falling down, and it seems to be a force. Can you imagine, guys? Isaac Newton's experience of gravity was probably like a divine experience. Imagine noticing something that nobody on the planet has noticed yet. It's one of those, it's an incredible moment, I can tell you. So there is a test, you test it out, you see the result. So the analyzing of the data is seeing the result, and then you make a conclusion, and then you go back to the observation, right? So in some sense, the scientific method till the end of time updates, and till the end of time, the scientific community will never have one fixed story because the world is infinite, and our experience of it changes as we advance through it. That means there is no way we can hypothesize everything, even though in you can say theoretical physicists sometimes wonder about if there can be an equation that explains all of reality, and pretty much when it comes to I would say the scientific vision in theoretical physics, we're pretty much looking at the big and we're looking at the small. Einstein's relativity contributed to the big in understanding the big things going on in reality, and I would say quantum physics, what's the term? Quantum physics focuses on the micro. So that means pretty much imagine a bunch of human beings on the planet. They're looking around, they're testing things, they're not living as absolutists, and pretty much constant updating of the framework that we started through, and believe it or not, even though we say the scientific method, but ladies and gentlemen, life is strangely very similar to the scientific method, where every day we wake up, we pretty much, think of it this way, we're asleep, we wake up, we observe the day, we look around, notice things, we make a plan for the day, for the meaning of our day, the hypothesis, and then we go live the day. And then after the day, we're like, how was the day, And then in some sense, we conclude the day before we sleep, and then we wake up again. And it seems like every day that we live, it's as if layer over layer over layer of information shifting our perception, right? In one of my talks, I shared a very interesting idea. I'm waiting for the sirens to pass, guys. Okay. So in one of my talks, in a bunch of them actually, I shared this idea that my experience as a human being born on this planet, was not that the child gets conditioned into ideology. It's that every day we open our eyes, a wave of information hits us, wave of information, waves after wave. For example, in my childhood, there was religious ideology around where I was raised, and in just pretty much the country of Iran, it's a theocracy. So in some sense there was religious ideology, and that was the first wave, then my own curiosity, and then when I went to attended school, I was actually taught science, but I didn't understand the scientific method when I was young. That means teachers are teaching science, but they don't teach the scientific method, so the students like, what am I hearing right now? So this is the tragedy of teachers of science. They don't share the significance of the historical update of the discoveries of science, right? So the child is born not realizing that we evolve to come to great conclusions, So anyways, so waves of information hit us, and this whole thing is going on. And pretty much, where was I going with this? Sorry guys. Yeah. So, anyways, waves of information, pretty much we accumulate information and we filter, we articulate information. You can say articulation is a sort of filtering of what has deeper dimensions and what doesn't. That means if a person sees a painting in an art gallery, they're just staring at it as if no opinion. But now imagine a person looks at this painting, for example the Mona Lisa, and you start articulating it. You're like, wait a minute, Da Vinci started drawing. Sorry guys, I noticed the stream was disconnected for some time. I don't know what people heard or didn't hear. But anyways, I'll assume it was, I guess. You see, for example, these sirens we're hearing right now, people hear in the background, that's the advancement of science. That means people studied sound. You see, they studied vibration, and then in some sense, what we perceive, we invent. The spirit of invention is divine. It is secular divinity. The inventor is equivalent to novelty. That means if somebody sees a miracle, that's technically something unknown and new that is happening, right? And you can say when an inventor creates something, it's something unknown and new for everybody. Now the question comes to a point where this is where I really enjoy talking about this part. So I'm a person who I have developed my own, pretty much philosophers are human beings. They are born and they make observations of life, but their conclusions are not just based on testing something in front of our eyes. I have developed something where I call Mr.Within's inner and outer realmism. Pretty much, and when I say I've designed this, it's not like the ideas we're pretty much, think of it this way. We're all biological beings in a world, and technically if we make an observation on the nature of the human being, it cannot be singular. That means many people will probably come to the same conclusion from different parts of the world. And this has been the case, right? I don't remember the exact names, but there have been scientists one scientist in one part of the world came up with something, and another scientist in another part of the world, they came up with something, and they came up with that thing in the same 100 years of a time frame. So anyways, I consider the inner realms and the outer realms. I call this Mr. Within's inner realm and inner and outer realmism. And so the way I concluded it is that in front of our eyes we see objects, external objects. Behind our eyes we see internal objects. And for a long time I was like, where are my thoughts happening? Where are my thoughts happening? And it seemed that something in, I would say, just the evolution of knowledge so far it's like, it's very easy for us to accept an idea. We're like, yeah, I just had an idea, right? It's not an idea, is not a physical thing, but it has image and vision, right? That means in front of your eyes you can touch an apple, but if you visualize an apple, you can touch an apple and bite it, but behind your eyes, if you visualize an apple, you can't grab that apple and bite it. But you notice that in some sense it has geometry, color, and depth, but not tangibility in regards to touch. So behind our eyes, you see how the scientific method starts from observation. Observation is an internal thing, in the sense that, and of course, through, you can say, the scientific vision, we have a brain. This brain is like a jar, you know, and this jar of neurochemistry, biochemistry, and so neurobiochemistry. And so pretty much, when, like right now as I'm giving this talk, what is seen is that inside my brain the neurons are moving from different points. So in some sense there's a lightning storm of neural activity in the brain. And what's very fascinating is that this creature that we are looks at the world, and it's as if light enters its eyes and the world is seen there, right? As if the light has to touch the nerve ends. And there's we have three pigment. I don't know how to explain the biology of it, but at the edge, at the back of our eyes, our biological eyes, what do you call it? There are these nerve endings, and these three of the nerve endings translate the colors of red, green, blue, which the color spectrum emerges from. So, in this episode, I am not saying that scientists are imagining reality, even though theoretical physics is that. But I am in some sense saying that the observation, the state of observation, where both the scientific method and all belief systems, whether you're religious, whether you're this, that, whatever, we all start off from the presence of consciousness, and then observation is made, as if we are a candle in a dark room and the light illuminates the environment and we receive. So the question comes, I've written this in the subtitle, where is the hypothesis made? Where is the hypothesis happening? That means if a person says, yeah, like imagine Isaac Newton, you know, he sees the apple fall, right? And he hypothesizes that there's some force behind it, something's doing it. You know, just like a person back in the day, a wind would hit them, right? So it's as if like, we have the concept of the wind, and so it makes sense that we have the concept of an invisible force that influences things, right? Like the wind is like, you can't say the wind is a force, it's a consequence of forces, but the wind, kind of imagine a wind like, you know, blowing a stack of papers, right? The wind is it, even though it is particles on a naked to the eye that are moving, but in some sense, like the gust of wind, but in some sense we cannot see it, right? So I'm trying to make this point that the observation, the hypothesis is not real. The conclusion, the hypothesis on reality is real, but our mind that is in some sense looking at the world, copy pasting it in the inner realms and like shifting it, and then we look at the world and we have a comparison point. Like there's something very complex there, right? Because right now, even me giving this talk, I could say my biological body is real, my voice is real, but the ideas that I'm sharing, how real are those? You see, and even when it comes to ideologies, ideas that in some sense they synchronize with think of it this way, content behind your eyes that synchronizes with how actual existence is happening. They, in some sense, you can link. What that means is I'm pretty much saying that there is one world, one physical giant landscape, the surface of this rock where all of us are, but every person is having their own angle on the one angle where we're all in. So it's as if physical reality is like is a point of a circle, like the physical world, and all the ideas we have it are in some sense the radius. And so now I am saying, where's the circumference of the circle? Where is the edge of the mind? The mind is not a physical thing. The brain is, but what the brain is doing is not physical. Do you see? That means, sure, neurons are moving, but how the neurology instantaneously is personality, there is literally no time. Anything that becomes instantaneous, we cannot test it. So if there is a chance that consciousness, the hard problem of consciousness, is the instantaneity of energy and attention, there is literally nothing else you can do. It's as if it's a universal. It's as if, how do we test the color blue? There is no testing the color blue. The color blue is just blue. You see? It just is it. Right? But if we wanted to test the color blue and red mixing with one another, then we could, you know. Or blue and yellow, which creates green, for example. So my point is that we as a species, all of us, 8 billion human beings here, instead of fighting like our like our past in history, how many people have fought over truth, right? Galileo was in some sense sentenced to house arrest by the Inquisition at the time, by the clergy, you know, for in some sense suggesting that the earth spins around the sun, you know, and in some sense the earth is not the center of the universe. And the religious views at the time were like, yo buddy, you saying God's creation is not the center of the universe, how dare you? Now let me tell you something funny. I personally, because I perceive it multidimensionally, both of them were right. Both of them were right. Consciousness is the center of the universe. The mind starts from the center. Like literally, the world that I'm talking about right now, it's all around me. Do you see? All the senses are coming into the body. You know, the body's like the brain is in some sense vacuuming sensory perception. Or the sensory perception is going into the sort of vacuum nature. So you can say the mind is the center of our universe, like the person looking at reality. Your mind is the center of your universe, but the body is not the center of the universe. There is so much bigger things than us happening here, that we are in the outer realms, ants on a hill. And believe it or not, sometimes I've looked at this world and I'm like, okay, it's too big. It's not made for humans only. Do you see it? That means it's like when you have, let's say in Netherlands, people are very tall there. So in some sense, the doorways are made longer, taller, you know, you can say. However, or I shouldn't say however, building up on that idea, just like there's a tall person and we need a bigger doorway, it's as if when we look at this gigantic universe, we see the giant doorway, but we don't see the giant being that this doorway is for, right? So, and we should have this notion, we should learn from Socrates, where he says the only true wisdom is to know that you know nothing. Why does he say that? Because there is, ladies and gentlemen, there's way more unknown than known. Whatever you do, whatever you try to know, right? And I will tell you the supremacy that the religious mind, and when I say religion, there's first of all different religions, and each religion has a sort of ceremonial attitude with the world. That's what this makes it unique. And religions also have the component of a creator, a sort of intelligent origin to the universe usually, whether their intelligence is good, bad, different religions, and there is usually a book of revelatory value. And it's as if, imagine you went to a library and you're like, there were so many different kinds of books there, and then you ask the person, hey man, do you have any extraordinary books here? Imagine you ask a librarian, do you have any book that is just out of the normal, something that is like strange? And then the librarian would be like, of course, we have books which were revelation. We have books which it was God speaking to man through an angelic voice. Okay. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that we are not in one world, ladies and gentlemen. We are in two worlds simultaneously. And even if people disagree with this, we also have two brain hemispheres. They say the left brain hemisphere points towards an analytical understanding of reality, and the right brain hemisphere focuses on a creative approach. So the left brain's, like, in some sense using the past, is utilizing the past, and the right brain is in some sense trying to have a relationship with its future. It's as if, and of course guys, nobody can just, like, literally brains are different. Not everybody's brain, I mean, it has a similar structure for the human species, but how our brains are different, For example, the brain of that guy who the movie Rain Man is based on, that guy who goes into casinos and is like a next level savant, mathematical genius. They looked at his brain and they noticed that the way his brain, like the neural networking of his brain, was as if the center of his brain was absent, and so the brain had to reconnect all its connections. Right, so it has been the case that people who, even somebody who, let's say, there's a sort of damage done to the brain. Let's just think of it through as a neurologist, right? When there's damage done to the brain, right, it pretty much means certain parts of the brain are not working, right? But the brain is being kept alive by the heart, right? So the heart is like the general, and the brain is like the commander. And so when the heart is like, you got to keep going to the commander, and even though the brain could have shifts and fluctuations in regards to what happens to it, right? But the brain reconnects. So the circuitry in our brain readjusts, right? So that's something very important to keep in mind, right? And it's also based on what we do as a human being, which activates the synapses in the brain. So we move, and then the brain's like, oh yeah, I got something to do. Let me see. Guys, I have a very, for some reason, a very small notebook here. I gotta literally, people are like, Mr.Within has so many notes. It's a really small notebook, guys. So the hypothesis is the approach to the foundation. Is trying to figure out the foundation of reality. If the foundation of reality is beginning behind our eyes, and if we in modern times say imagination is not real, we have committed a grave error. Imagination is 3/4 of reality, and is 3/4 as real as reality. That means the outer realms, again, the only thing that's different, but that means somebody can close their eyes and they can still visualize like the room they're in, right? But the only difference is the tangibility. So the internal object is being witnessed by an attributeless self. The external object is being witnessed by the internal object, which ultimately is being witnessed by the attributeless self. And the attributeless self is another way of saying, I personally have perceived it like this, that you know what I think is going on with human intelligence on this planet. There is actually a field of intelligence. This field cannot die. It's a quality of the universal sector. Just like how flowers suddenly emerged, right? Intelligence has also emerged, right? But we use the term emergence for anything that in some sense has to do with the transformation of energy, because the concept of energy, in accordance to the third law of thermodynamics, cannot be created or destroyed. It can just transform from form to form. So what we actually are saying is the emergence of the biological animal, the evolutionary animal, is actually a transformation of an energy that has nowhere else to go aside from being the moment. And there is something cool, guys, I need to say about knowledge. When you look at the dictionary, I heard this from Alan Watts. Alan Watts is this very great philosopher and human being. Alan Watts, when he was in university, he has this story where he says him and his friends, they were pretty much very like advanced students, you know. And so for fun, they would all go into the library, they would all get dictionaries, and they would pretty much look up a word and its meaning and endlessly keep on going and looking at the meaning of the word. And eventually they came to the conclusion that it's like a round circle. So it's as if we explain one thing based on another thing, and we explain that other thing based on another thing, and there is literally an infinite regression, or there is a closing of the cycle. Right? So what that means is it's either we put two mirrors in front of one another, or we, in some sense, that there's just one mirror, you know? So this thing about reality, perceiving a multidimensional perspective, perceiving an outer realm and an inner realm, means for the first time an unknown emergent attention is engaging a known landscape and is in an unknown way re-knowing everything. And of course, guys, the word science comes from scientia in Latin, which just means knowledge, right? So the scientific method is a method to know things. But I would say religion, even though it's not a method, but technically its result is like a method, where I would say religion is a method to know the unknown. So if you want to know about the observable universe, you pretty much take the approach of you utilize our scientific advancement, and the mighty hand of science will assist. I will tell you, science has such an important role in our lives, because in the future we may actually become technological beings. Who knows? You know, who knows how far technology is going to go. If technology can replace body parts, then it's fair to say that in the future the whole body of the person is going to be replaced by technology, maybe except the brain. Or we can even go to the brain in the gut idea that I believe it was Descartes who suggested that, Descartes, where he was building up on Plato's allegory of the cave, which means we are raised in a reality, but there is more. That's what it means. It means reality is a simulation. And the only reason why we need to use the scientific method constantly is because simulations change. It's a changing world. That means nobody can be like, yo, put this world in a sentence for me. I'm too, I'm too lazy to explore the whole universe. Impossible. Language is the small and the big. You cannot fit the big in the small. You can fit the small in the big. That means we can fit knowledge in unknown systems of thought or new ways of approaching things, but we cannot fit new discoveries into old ones. Or at least not all the time. So I've written here something. I've written now to kind of go towards more philosophy. I've written here, are we imaginary creatures inside reality, or real creatures inside imagination? So I feel this is an important question. If there is 0.00, whatever amount of zeros you want, 1% chance where we're multidimensional, the lion has to roar anew. That's the nature of even the scientific method. New observations force us to, in some sense, march into the unknown and rediscover. That is the beauty of life. But anyways, it became intense for a moment. So I have developed pretty much 4 ways. This is something of my own work, where 4 potential reality possibilities of the world. So I was thinking about one thing, and then I realized I can think about it in 4 different ways. So let me see how I can approach this. Oh yeah. Okay. So guys, I want the listeners to, you see, everything when it comes to at least art, the what we call thinking. Thinking means you have more than one thought. But if we had only one thought, you can't say you're thinking. You know, life would be a photograph, but because it's a film, the thoughts change. So so if we use this model of a self and a world as codependent, this would mean that every human being, whatever, it doesn't matter, this is a universal, or at the beginning of life, I could say, at least. You know, I'm not going to talk about the mystical experience of union of the individual and the collective, but of the individual activity and the collective activity and their inseparability, which is rendered a non-dual position of being. But I would say that there's a self and there's a world. We are a self in the world. And as a self in the world, either the self is real, the world is real, which is how we're approaching it currently. Either, which I would say the status quo is right now, agreeing with this. So, okay. There's a self, there's a world. These are the options. I'll start from actually differently. I could say one option is that the self is real and the world is real. One option is the self isn't real and the world isn't real. All of this is just the hallucination of emptiness. Okay, if everything is real, that is in some sense, you can say it's another way of, anyways, I'll get to that. So okay. Real self, real world. Imaginary self, imaginary world. Imaginary self, real world. Real self, imaginary world. These are the 4 possibilities, and pretty much I'm going to speak about these. let's say we start with the self. In some sense, we start with the world being real and the self being imaginary. This is technically due to how the scientific community has a fixation on something. How would I say it? Rene Descartes. Sorry, not Descartes. Plato spoke about how if you put a stick in like a pond, the stick will appear through the reflection of the pond to be curved. So the stick is, due to the refraction of light, the stick is curved. Now, Plato was making this comment that he was saying sensory perception cannot always be trusted. Think of like a magic show, think of illusionists, right? And think of us human beings looking at this world and being like, what is illusion, what is real? And so, due to the vastness of the universe, that question will take a long time to answer. So, in some sense, we can't be in a reality. I'll say it like this. Let me actually, guys, it's like I want to share 4 world views. But I'm getting ideas from each of them, but I'm trying to go consecutively. I'll say it like this. How do we know that the self isn't real and the world isn't real? Let's start from that. Let's say if the self is real and the world is real and somebody tells you this, how do we check to see if they are real or not? We see that the self, the internal idea, the ego, is not real. Because it changes, it transitions. Pretty much a person goes to sleep, wakes up, and as they wake up to the day, they have a new archetypal beginning to the day. So the self is not real. Why? Because light is going in the brain and the neurology is leading to something. You can say the neural activity is projecting something. So it's kind of like the way I'm saying it's the self is not real, in the same way where if a person went to a cinema and saw a film, the film is not real, is not the reality. The film is a projection. Do you see the actors in the cinema, inside the film are not actually there? Do you see? So from that sense, we can't say the self is real. We're all imagining ourselves into reality. Or we are realizing ourselves in a very imaginary realm, which is in some sense the inner realms. So if a person closes their eyes, I will tell you it's unknown movement of reality. There can be. Think of dreams. The poet Attar, he was like, think of how, I don't remember the exact line, but this poet from like 1,000 years ago, he says something like, look at our dreams, how many secret wisdoms, how much secret wisdom they hold, right? You can imagine somebody during the time where, let's say, what is it, in the let's say when the first automobile came, the first automobile, imagine the first person who bought the first locomotive, that person went to sleep and imagine they dreamed they're driving the locomotive in the sky, right? That dream it had, like, in some sense it reveals content that in some sense the outer realms cannot, do you see, or could not, right? And a lot of the work on this planet is creative work. Pretty much the creative industry is huge, right? We're not all behaving like robots, right? Where it's just pure calculation and measurement without emotion. The fact that we have emotions, our worldview shifts in accordance to them. A person can feel great. Somebody comes and says you're not great. If the person believes in the language, believes in the language of the other person, then they become suddenly emotional. Why? Because the sense of self to themselves has changed, right? That means we become way more emotional when something happens to us than compared to when something happens to another person. So emotions are in some sense interruption of a sort of mode of behavior, you can say. But in reality, emotions are reaction to the effect of something. And at the same time, emotions are super mysterious. Don't think like just by me saying that sentence I've kind of set it in stone. Okay, so to get over quickly through this part, we check reality. We're like, okay, the physical world, it's here. The physical world is real and it exists. I'm touching this table right now. That means the world is real, but the self is imaginary. Okay, so if we were to wonder about the reality of an imaginary self in the world, we find creativity and novelty, which we are finding right now. If we were, in some sense, you can say you had a real self, and the world was unreal, right? This is the more mystical perception, right? So the mystics treated this whole physical world in Vedanta, you can say, as samsara. Samsara means, I don't remember the exact, but it's pretty much, it's like ignorance, illusion. You know, that means it's as if truth is here, but if you can't notice it, you're pretty much looking at the illusion. So the yogic mind went into the cave. The yogi back in the day, when even nowadays you sometimes might find videos of them on YouTube. But the yogi went into the cave. The yogi was like, all right, the life is like a dream. Just like a dream, we don't know the beginning and we don't know its end. We just appear in it. Pretty much the human being has born. We know the beginning and ending of the individual body, but we don't know the beginning and ending of the world. Right? So to the yogi, the world was a dream. Or you can say a projection. Now, what was the real self? The real self was a presence in the yogic mind. And if you notice, not just polytheistic religions, but monotheistic religions, in the monotheistic religion, right, pretty much the religious person is being encouraged to have a relationship with the creator of the universe. Now, the creator of the universe in religion, something at least the religions can agree on, the monotheistic, the Abrahamic religions can agree on, is that God is, there is a creator, a singular creator, but the singular is inconceivable. Now, this is the bizarre thing. If we can say that, like, if we are using the word God and God is inconceivable, what are people talking about? You know, that means it surpasses even the notion of singularity, which is, you can say, the mind's arithmetic. So the yogic mind, they were real. The world was an illusion. Now, I have this view. This is where I feel in the future, I'm this very, you could say, unique person in history who speaks about a subjective evolution. And they don't teach this in schools, but it's an observation I've made, which I've decided to talk about it. So I perceive 4 phases to evolution. If I could just make a point here, the 4 phases of evolution is that there's an unconscious world, there is an unconscious self, then there is a conscious self, then there's going to be a conscious world. So right now, so if you can go back and just try to fathom in your mind, whoever you are listening, the more you go back in history, there were no human beings. Our earliest ancestor was emptiness, was nothing. You know, so it was just, or I shouldn't say nothing, it was the planet. Okay, our earliest ancestor is legit, like just the planet. So from this unconscious world, a part of nature, a part of earth separated from earth. That means we began walking on the earth, but this was pre-conscious mindhood. So that's why I'm saying there was an unconscious self. You could just imagine like a creature moving, but a creature not having any subdivisions of personality or even being able to acknowledge dimensions to itself to even consider it's a changing self. Because the concept of change is multidimensional. But the way we treat knowledge in current society is like a photograph. It's as if the world reality is a verb, but we are looking for nouns. We're fighting over nouns. It has to be this picture or it has to be that picture, but believe it or not, it's a film. All these pictures play a part in it. They're all frames, you know. Imagine, like we say there's 24 frames per second, in film production. But we can say there is probably, like, I don't know, like let's say billions of frames or perceptions internally that the person goes through. A billion is too much, but let's say millions of perceptions the person goes through before they per lifetime. So it's like a million frames of thought per lifetime. Rather than 24 frames of a certain image becoming a film as we speed up reality. You can even say consciousness is speed. That particle just began moving faster and faster and began moving faster than its ecosystem. So it began becoming conscious of its ecosystem. So in the model I was sharing, UWUSCSCW, we are right now at the CS point. What that means is I'm a conscious self. We're conscious selves. We're conscious that there is a world, and as the body is individual and we move in it, we can formulate a singular subjectivism to ourselves, right? An idea of ourselves. And plus, we also are named. I forgot to mention that. We're a creature that names itself. How bizarre is that? You don't see, like, animals in nature name itself. You don't see, like, a lion roaring differently for all its let's say younglings, to all the lion cubs to come. The lion just roars and the cubs just get it straight, right? Rather than the lion calling a specific cub. Now, I don't know. I mean, I'm not I haven't studied, like, zoology, but I don't know if, like, the psychology of animals, they have naming or not. But for example, there's a fish underneath the ocean that that this fish, in order to attract mates, makes a giant geometrical shape on the sand, and the mate comes, Or you can say for the peacock, it has a sort of consciousness where it sees a mate and it shows its, for example, feathers, right? There is no name and form, but there is me and you in animal life, okay? Even though there is no conscious subjective framework, as if the brains of lesser species have not evolved as far as the brain of the human being. We have pretty much a greater antenna somehow. So the future will eventually go to the conscious world. The conscious world is where the self is real and the world is real. No longer we're playing games of illusion and truth. But this is so in the future, where after I've perceived this is, think of it as just I'm one person talking, but one person out of 8 billion human beings in a universe of a billion trillion suggested stars. So in the future, I can look at human consciousness right now, and I can hypothesize in some sense. It's like right now we are a self in a world. The self disconnected from the world, it has not reconnected with the world. When our self reconnects with the world becomes our true self. That means right now, our consciousness, we think it's being projected from the brain. But believe it or not, it can be said that there is a field where all these particles are moving in. That field is something that the particle can return to. It's in a similar way where ancient mystics, for example, the likes of Rumi, Hafez, Attar, Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi, this poet from, I believe, 700, 800 years ago, he says, you're not just a drop in the ocean. You're the whole ocean in the drop. What this means is your body is not just a small little thing in the cosmos. Your mind is being the cosmos in the body. And I'll also share a quote from one of my, I would say a person who I've listened to a lot of his videos, by the name of Neil deGrasse Tyson. I would encourage anybody who wants to get into physics and has an interest in science, you gotta look up Neil deGrasse Tyson. This man is like one of the few beacons of true scientific communication to culture. Imagine in the future, cyberspace allows us to connect to a field of being. So imagine all of people's minds are right now like I'm an individual embodied. I have an individual body. Look at our language. We even say I have, as if the I is different from what it has. Like I am a body right now, but also, again, I can't ignore that the body is like the wax of the candle and consciousness is the candle flame. And because there is the candle flame, there is the body. We are aware of the body, right? For example, when we sleep at night, the candle flame goes out, we go into deep sleep, and then in a dream state, a different candle, a different consciousness is accessed. And then we wake up from the dream and we come back to the conscious waking state where I'm talking to everyone. So if in the future, technology allows there to be multiple minds, so pretty much I'm thinking human beings in the future, maybe, I mean probably, there's going to come a time where some people, a majority of, not majority, or maybe a minority of the population will decide to connect their brains and stop experiencing only imagination that is inspired out of the biology senses. So imagine you have, let's say 7 people, and these 7 people, they've all, I'll say it in another way. Imagine you have one, I'll say it in 2 ways. Imagine you have 7 people, they've all connected their conscious space, their minds together through technology. This means any of them can experience the other person's body. Or I'll say it this way, imagine we have person A, person B, person C, they all connect their consciousness to a technology, they create a common line, so we have the mind of, imagine person A has the mind of person A, person B has the mind of person B, person C has the mind of person C. If their minds get connected, it becomes like the line ABC. So their mind is ABC, you know, like one, I'm visualizing a geometric way of explaining this. For example, you have 2 points A, B, you connect the line, you create a line A, B, or BA. So similarly, we connect 3 people and we create the lines of ABC, BCA, CBA, all these possibilities of imagination. So this would mean, in a sense, that in the future, way in the future, and I don't know how long, I mean cyberspace, I've predicted it's gonna, like, the first 120 years for cyberspace, but this thing I'm telling you, this is, I've perceived it in my, you can say, internal vision of the universe, that beyond cyberspace, 3,600 years from now, the species will have a choice off planet to make a decision in regards to how long do we want to echo on this genetical pattern, right? That means if we recognize that the mind is a field, the body is a particle moving in this field, if we get to a point where the mind becomes way more real than the body, then we have multiple bodies. Right, so right now, for example, I'm giving this live stream, I have to use words to translate my inner realms where imagination is taking place to talk about reality. right? But in the future, imagine live stream technology gets so next level that you can live stream a person's emotions. You can live stream, pretty much. Imagine I wouldn't have to give this talk in the future. People can just enter my imagination, right? It can be suggested something like this, but eventually it's going beyond the dual framework of the human ideology. We either echo on the genetical pattern, pretty much we have sex till the end of time and overpopulate the whole universal sector, you know, or in some sense we reach a point of sophistication as intelligence moving, as a sort of the animate moving the inanimate, where we return to the animate field, right? So pretty much your mind's an ocean, your body is a drop. The body's like, yo, what's with this worldly intelligence? And the body goes through, like the raindrop falls on a leaf, it then falls into a river, then the rivers connect to the ocean. Do you see? So intelligence can surpass this noun obsession we've had, but it will also shift civilization and the meaning of it, right? I often in these talks of mine talk about an advanced civilization, but the more further we go in the future, the less we are a self in the world, and the more there is just a world and the selves realize it. An intelligent world. That means intelligence is like its own, it's sovereign, or it's independent. The body is dependent on the mind, but the mind is not dependent on the body. The mind is dependent on, in some sense, how would I say it? In Vedic thought, they say the seer of the seen is unseen. So that means something that is not in sight is accessing sight. Now it's identifying with the sight as access, but the moment it sees it's beyond the sensory, and of course our visual, like this world that we're seeing right now, is a certain range in the electromagnetic spectrum, right? But if we want to wonder about beyond the sensory, individualism is in the sensory domain. So beyond the sensory, there is no saying that we're individuals, but there could be individuals. There could be, like, this whole time on Earth, another dimension where, and I don't want to say alien as if like from the stars, but there could be an alien in regards to different. Like there could be a different dimension of intelligence going on. When you look at the religious narrative, you find actually they are living in a multidimensional world. A religious person is not living in one world. They are living in one world, but they're living in a world that can go between two different worlds. There's a heaven, there's a hell. If you are righteous, you go to heaven. If you're not righteous, you go to hell, for example, right? So what does that mean? There's a transcendental narrative. For example, the same with, what do you call it? Even in a cultural sense, when you look at religions, they have the concept of entities beyond this dimension, right? There's like the angel archetype, there's like the demon archetype. Many people don't know this, but for example, in the Islamic text, it's the message of the Islamic text is not just to humans. That means any person can go ask a Muslim, in some sense, is the holy book just for humans? And the answer is no. It's not just for humans. It's for humankind and this other, you can say, archetype. But the whole reason I'm sharing this is just to suggest that it's multidimensional, not that the imagery has to substitute the explorer's eyes in a world that infinitely changes. You know, in a changing world, there's really nothing to fear. The only thing that we're fearing is the absence of our ability. Because if we all know that we're energy, it's as if, like, imagine you realize that the cells in your body, the atoms that constitute you are stardust. That means it's as if we're made of stardust right now. So when you look at stardust, it totally deviates away. Even like that's the whole thing about physics. It deviates from storytelling into observing reality, and then you see how in the scientific method it says analyze data and report conclusions, right? So the reporting of the conclusion it's pretty much what it is it's like religions are set in one world narrative, but the scientific method is endlessly re-updating the method. That means it's as if you're a religious person and you're wrong, you go to hell. If you're a scientific person and you're wrong, you just update. You just change the world story. And honestly, this is where you can totally see the militant atheistic movement does not have a compassion for how religious ideology leaves the person's psychology. I've had philosophical conversations with religious people from different traditions, and in the conversation, at midway in the conversation, the person was like, don't tell me, as if the religious mentality doesn't want the world to actually change. That's the thing about life. We want truth to be where we are, rather than realizing it's a film, it's a changing world. Truth is the state of how all is being simultaneously. And this is closer to Spinoza's God, In the chat section, Lorna says, great movie. Yeah. Yeah, this life is honestly a great movie. Sometimes the actor is improvising, sometimes the actor believes in a director to the universe, And so guys, I've successfully shared the four types of possibilities of reality. So just final comments, and then I will be on Discord for those interested. The Discord link can be found in the description of the video, where the equal signs are. I would say that our species has been playing whack-a-mole with duality for too long, and it's time that we usher in an era of multidimensional communication which will advance the meaning of life. That means, right now, as I'm talking, I want people of any let's say you're a child listening to this, imagine after 100 years, I'm no longer here, and you're a child listening to this lecture of mine. Somehow cyberspace memory has, let's say, stayed. I would encourage that the future generations begin having this approach that we don't know who people are, and we don't know who we are, and this is okay. This is the state of observation. Now, as we observe, we accumulate information, but again, the brain is too small to fit this giant universe in it, right? And every person, there's this saying, they say this wisdom saying, they say every person is fighting a battle you cannot see. That means a person can come and be like, yeah guys, I'm perfectly fine, everything's great, and everybody's going to be like, yeah, look at how great and strong this person is. But then when the person is alone with themselves, the pressure of reality could, there could be an avalanche in the inner realms, right? I've had moments where for a long time I have actually, very stable perception, emotions come and go. That means it's not that I'm not emotional, but the emotion doesn't linger. The emotion comes, and the moment the information of the moment changes, the emotion's nature changes, the emotion's expression in the psyche changes. It is important that we as a species tolerate ourselves. There's going to be a lot of first time trying things out, and it's not going to work out, and so the human being should cultivate multidimensional tolerance. And in some sense, we should, rather than judging people just good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, it's as if enough of throwing this hammer around, There was this Mario game, Super Smash Bros, where it was as if I would play this character called Kirby, in this game, and this character would get a hammer, and the hammer would go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, you know. So similarly, human beings now are mature enough, I find, in our species, as a species, as an intelligent network of human beings that are no longer living like wild animals, because we've been there. You know, anybody being violent in civilization, we've been there for the longest time. We were violent, and civility is the new update. Being able to use your mind and live a life of the mind, moving the body, rather than the ecosystem just defining your mind, you know. So let us usher in, as a species and as 8 billion advanced communicators of, you know, this universal sector of the Milky Way, let's say galactic sector, and we begin as a species realizing everybody can be looked down upon and everybody can be looked up upon, but the main aim is what efficient technologies we pull out from our inner realms into the outer realms. And the logos in my work, poetically one night, I wrote this thing where it was as if like behind every person's eyes there is a library, but it's up to them to share it. It's a choice. And so as we advance communication all over the planet, plus I gotta say this, I mean, think about it. We went through physical mastery, right? Like right now, back in the day, people couldn't do backflips, right? They didn't even know what a backflip was. You know, maybe like somehow they flipped or something, you know, but they didn't know what it was. It wasn't as if they tried to stabilize a method for it, right? If the further we go, like the caveman wasn't doing backflips, right? But then the complexity in the outer realms reached a point where right now we have people doing parkour and remarkable things, you know. Now we mastered we mastered the movement in the outer realms to some degree as a body. Now we have to begin, in some sense, trying to cultivate more advanced initiations of mindhood on this realm. And I will tell you, the moment the majority of the population in their inner realms realize that an advanced civilization is literally the only thing we can do here. We can literally advance civilization or literally go and eat fruit in the forest, you know. You know, we can go back to pre-monkey business, or currently, you know, in modernity's post-monkey business, you know. So anyways, whoever you are, wherever you are, honor your species. You get to see it once in this lifetime, in the format that you find yourself in. And this doesn't mean just because we want to build an advanced civilization, everything's going to work out. There's going to be probably like 200 years of stumbling as a species. But the moment we get through that 200-year period, imagine, the advanced civilization will be self-sustaining, hopefully. And of course, these ideas, you know, are way in the future. But anyways, and of course, guys, go have a conversation with your local scientist, you know. This, even if you're a religious person, you know, you should, just because you see a human, let's say a militant atheist talks rudely about science, it doesn't mean the religious mentality should make science an enemy of religion, you know. Science is a method, and pretty much it's like the brain approaching the world in different ways. We all have different DNAs, right? Even if we use the same method, the result in the psychology of the person wouldn't be the same. They called this there was something called the double slit experiment in quantum physics, where the observer of the experiment was having an influence on a very sub-level, on a very micro level on reality, right? As if our attention moves things outside of our body even. But anyways, guys, the scientific method is a great tool, and till the end of time there is no truth truth declaration game in the scientific mind. It's all about what we have seen so far. And scientists are incredible people. That means in my youth, you know, I can tell you, when I was raised in Iran, I saw way more religious people than scientifically minded people. But when you realize that it's as if it's an advantage, it's an opportunity, you know, to be able to observe life, experience it, and re-update the perception on it, you know. So anyways, guys, I guess this kind of ends the episode. I'll say this, but there is also a metaphysical point. We are imagining reality, you know, and we are realizing imagination. And we are literally on a bridge between a purely known physical universe and a purely unknown universe, a purely objective universe, and a purely unknown subjective universe. And in the middle, there is the mind's games of how the life changes. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening, and potentially if this talk of mine gets to the ears of the future and it finds the cyberspace era, if you're a being that is not 100% biological, you need to honor biology, even if the smallest percentage of your body is biological. That means we don't have cyborg philosophers yet, but those cyborg philosophers should care about the origin of nature beyond simulations. Because even if there is an illusion in a simulation, the simulation is being simulated from somewhere. The film that's projected on the cinema screen is projected from somewhere, right? And the source is in some sense not the film. So beyond our eyes, our real eyes could be waiting. Thanks for listening, guys. Blessings. I'll be on Discord. Namaste. And thanks to all the new members of the channel.